This video is the next one in the Historic Ordnance video series. It's on a mine that originated during the Soviet era. Now, it's not going to be on this one. This is the TMDB or TMD Bravo. This originated during World War II. The mine I'm going to show you is actually an evolution of this mine. The mine that I'm going to show you is the TM-62D. Now, I've done two videos on the TM-62 mine series already, the TM-62M and the TM-62P3. The M is the metal cased version, the P3 is the most common of the plastic cased. This is the emergency wartime production wood cased version of the TM-62. As I said, this is an evolution from the TMD Bravo. It's a simple wooden boxed mine that is meant to be produced in factories, primarily ones that handle wood. It specifically mentions in the Russian and Soviet and Ukrainian manuals furniture factories. So factories that probably do a lot of cabinetry and that type of stuff that are able to knock this out quickly. But it also states in there that any workshop that has basic woodworking tools can produce these mines. Now, the materials that are actually listed in the manuals state that you can use plywood, boards, or chipboard. And I think when they say for using chipboard, they're talking about the top plate and the bottom plate of the mine, because the sides you're still going to need lumber. Now, the dimensions on these mines, and I got these converted over to standard measurements. You have 13 3/8 inches by 11.61 inches with a height with the fuse installed around 7 inches. And the height really depends on how much filler you have inside. The Soviet manuals that the Ukrainian and current Russian manuals are based off of state that the amount of explosive you put in it is limited or determined by the number of mines you need and the amount of explosive available. The manual states there's 4 types of explosive that is meant for use inside these, but really you use what's available as long as it can be contained inside here without any major issues. The first type listed is TNT with a minimum amount of explosive, a minimum weight of 14 pounds, a maximum of 22 3/4 pounds. There's 2 types here that I do not recognize. I'm guessing these are some type of industrial grade explosives that were available in the Soviet Union. TGA and MS, they both have the same poundage range of minimum of 16 3/4, maximum of 24.5. The last explosive mentioned in the manual is A80 ammonite with a minimum of 12 3/4 pounds, a maximum of 16 1/3 pounds. Now, the standard military explosive when this mine was adopted was 1/4 pound TNT blocks. So that's why that's what is listed as the primary in there. And those are standard set dimensional blocks, which make it easier for figuring out the dimensions of your mine. Now, the weight of the mine with the explosive inside is listed as being between 25 and 29 pounds. Now, the general construction on this, I want to mention, these are low metallic mines. They are meant to be assembled with no nails at all. You're supposed to assemble them with dove cuts on the sides. You're supposed to assemble the rest of it using pegs and glue. That way you have a very low metallic mine. And when you have the fuse recommended for this mine, it is a no metallic mine, a non-metallic, which makes it extremely hard to detect even with current mine detection technology. Now, the fuses that are meant to be used with these are all of the fuses meant for the TM-62 mine series, but the primary one listed meant for use is the MVP62 plastic pressure fuse, the same as is used with the TM-62P mine series. Now, the activation poundage for the MVP62 fuse is a minimum of around 270 pounds. The manual lists that the estimated amount of pressure required to set one of these mines off is between 385 and 1,433 pounds. So there is some discrepancy even in the current Russian military and also Ukrainian military literature on how much it takes to set one of these off. These mines are making an appearance in the Ukrainian war right now. I noticed at the very beginning of the war, with the fight going on north of Kiev, I was seeing truckloads of mines being distributed to the territorial defense forces, the militias, and there were quite a few TM-62Ds. These mines were not already in inventory. These had to be made at that time. So they are out there. Now, it does say in the manual, if you have paint, especially green paint, paint the wood after it's assembled. If you do not have paint, you're supposed to pre-oil the wood, the manual stated, which I'm guessing you would go through, cut the dimensions that you need for the individual pieces. Then you would go through, wipe them down with oil, let the oil impregnate the wood, and then take those pieces, slap them together, put the explosive inside, and send them out. Now, the manual does show that the very top here, which you could consider a pressure plate, they actually show two pieces of wood. Two separate pieces which are brought together up here on the top with just a simple half moon cut in each one. But if you look at some of the pictures of the ones that were being manufactured at the start of the war in Ukraine, they were doing like this, taking a board and drilling a hole inside large enough for the fuse. So you had this top piece here, drilled large enough for the fuse to sit down inside. The piece underneath is a smaller diameter so that you create a shelf for the fuse to sit on. And this part here to fit inside so that it comes in contact with the explosive filler. It also states on the manual, or recommends, drilling 2 holes in the side and running through a synthetic material strap into those holes or some type of nylon rope, and then tying it off on the inside to make it easier for carrying the mine. Now, this mine does not have any secondary fuse wells. It's not meant to. If this mine would need to be booby trapped, it's supposed to be booby trapped with a separate booby trap device. In particular, the type similar to the MS3 booby trap mine device. If you get a look at the picture, it's deliberately made to look like a Russian anti-personnel mine, a PMN-1, which was the most common at the time that this was devised. So that way, you know, if the deminer, the engineer, comes through, finds the mine, digs around it, he finds that what looks like an anti-personnel mine underneath. Oh crap, they screwed up, put an AP mine underneath. I'm safe, pick it up, and sets off the device. The device goes off and then sets off the explosive inside here, right in that deminer's face. Now, these mines are not meant or cannot be deployed with a GMZ mine layer, a tracked mine layer, but it does state in the manual that they can be emplaced using the PMR series mine laying trailer. That trailer is basically a chute with wheels on it. You put these down the chute, and then after that counter goes to set distance, it lays out the next mine behind it. So as long as the dimensions on the outside fit in the chute, these can be used on the mine laying trailer. Now, according to Soviet literature, when they tested these back in the 60s and they came up with the design, if these mines are loaded to the maximum amount of explosives recommended, they are the most powerful and heaviest anti-tank mines in the inventory. During testing on Russian tanks, they were found that a single mine could destroy between 5 to 9 track blocks, along with the side skirt on that side, and also heavily damage the running gear and all that on that side. It specifically mentioned about bending the balancers near the blast site. Now, the markings on these mines. If you have the time, the manual says you should mark them. And the markings look like this. As I said, 2 blocks of wood on top with a moon-shaped cut. You actually see it in a photo here. This is a training mine. You can tell by the white mark here. Now, these markings are standardized. The top tells you what type of mine this is. The numbers here in the center. This first one over here on the left is the manufacturer's code, which I'm guessing is the factory it was supposed to be produced in. The next one is the batch number, and the final one is year of production. Not that it really matters. These are improvised mines. They knew, and they even mentioned in the manual, they're not going to last long. That's why they weren't produced. You know, they're meant for emergency wartime production. And they said you put the markings on only if you really need to. Now, what would happen for emplacing this? The mine is produced, it is filled. The need now comes about that it has to be employed. It gets paired with a fuse and sent forward, either to be emplaced by a resistance soldier or guerrilla, or emplaced by military engineers, because this is what they have. You can transport these already fused, so once you're at the mine dump, you would just drop in the fuse, and then when it actually gets to the spot where it's supposed to be emplaced on that minefield, just like with a TM-62P3, because it's the same fuse, press together on the legs, lift up on the bail, and pull out the safety fork. To arm the mine, you just press down on the little plunger. You'll have a rush of air coming out of the fuse because these are pressurized to protect them from being crushed. This fuse I've messed with a few times, so their pressure's already been released. Pressure gets released, it weakens the top of the fuse here, making it easier for it to break. The inside of this fuse is actually pre-cut in like a star pattern to make it easier for activating the mine. Now for removal, you would come through, check around the mine, make sure it's not booby trapped. If it's not booby trapped, you then remove the fuse, set it to the side, and then remove the mine. I show in the TM-62P3 series video how to take this from a armed status, putting in an unarmed status so that this fuse can be reused. If you want to learn how, go watch that video. These mines are very crude, very simple, and very effective. Now I have to throw this out here. Don't make one of these unless you're in a situation that you actually have to. You're in a resistance situation. Your country has been invaded. You know, those Chinese paratroopers have fallen out of the sky and they're driving around. Of course, your limiting factor is going to be having the actual fuse to actually be able to do something. It's not as simple as a TMD Bravo. But I have to throw this out there. Do not make a live one unless you're in that survival situation, that resistance situation. If you do, you will get caught and you will go to jail for a very long time. Now you can do like this. You can manufacture just a training example or display example. There's nothing illegal about that. There's nothing illegal about owning the training fuse. Now I will throw this out here for the idiots in Antifa and BLM. You cannot manufacture one of these mines, take one of these training fuses, and turn this training fuse into a live fuse. They are deliberately made to prevent that. So don't try it. Actually, you know what? Go ahead, try it, get caught, go to prison. Be that stupid. But everybody else, don't do it. Just double checking my notes, see if there's anything left that I was going to mention. Nope, I have all the information off of the from the manuals. It's a very simple mine to produce, meant to be done in basically any woodworking wood shop. But as I said, it's emergency wartime production. And don't do it unless you're in that wartime situation. The references I used for this was current Russian military manuals that can be found online that I had to use a translation program on, and I also got information from the Ukrainian army from their websites. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essay ons.